Welcome to the channel if it's your first time here, and welcome back if it's not. Now in today's Fix It Friday, which is sponsored by AliExpress, we're going to be doing some work on this. And this is the most criminally underrated console of my generation. It is the Sega Saturn, and I loved the Sega Saturn so much. Now, it wasn't a massive success over here in the UK because it sort of came out around about the same time as the PlayStation 1 and also I think the Nintendo 64. So those guys were sort of the more popular ones, but me being me, I like the sort of plucky underdog, which was the Sega Saturn. And this played some really good conversions of some of my favourite arcade games. Now you see, recently I was shopping on AliExpress and I picked up this, a Saroo cartridge. Now if you don't know what a Saroo cartridge is, basically this cartridge goes in this slot here and I guess allows you to play backed up versions of all your Sega Saturn games via an SD card. And you can play your games without the CD. These older CD units are prone to failure and can slowly die. The one on here is working perfectly fine at the moment, but they do degrade over time and need replacing. But the Saroo cartridge means that you can play all your games on the console with the right controller and as they intended to be, but you don't need to worry about the CD drive. So this is the particular one I've got. There are hundreds of these listed on AliExpress. And yeah, you can pick one up and buy it. Now they do come in different variations and most of them include different memory cards. And here's the memory card that came with my one. It's got a 64 gig SanDisk Extreme card, and that is loaded with some games on that you might want to try, maybe. I will stick a link in the video description to the one that I've purchased here. And what I'll do is I'll put some coupon codes in between my hands that you can use to get some money off your next purchase. Now, the coupon codes only have a limited life and use. So if you're watching this video ages after it's come out, they might not work. But what I'll do is I'll make sure there's some coupon codes in the description that should still work for you. Now, the thing is, I can put this into my UK console right now and play it and it will work. But the thing is with UK consoles, as we discussed when we did the Master System 2 50 to 60 Hertz video conversion, British games and games in Europe were slowed down by 18% to work on the British and European television systems, whereas the NTSC versions of the game, so that's what they used in America, they ran at full speed, which was 60 Hertz. So essentially any games that we run on the Saroo won't actually run at full speed. They will be at the sort of crippled UK/Europe 50 Hertz speed. Now the cool thing is about the Sega Saturn, specifically the sort of first generation of one like this one, is they are actually relatively easy to mod, but later models it is a little bit more difficult and perhaps a little bit more involved. So yeah, I might not cover exactly what you need in this video if you've got a slightly later version, but the gist is roughly the same. But anyway, let's stop talking. Let's get this console flipped over onto the grey mat and start disassembling it and trying to work out exactly what's inside and what we need to do to make this mod happen. To get into it, we have to remove the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. Okay, so now we're inside, and here, this is the bit we need to be careful of the old fingers with. This is the power supply board. Now this takes our 240 volts and puts it down into different voltages that the Sega Saturn likes. Now it does have these rather chonky capacitors, so there is a possibility that these are still full of voltage. We need to be careful with our fingers on this bit. But I think what I will do is I will disconnect this connector here. So now we've disconnected this connector at the back here. We should just need to remove this one screw here. So once that screw removed, we've got to go around the back and remove these two screws here that hold our power connector onto the case. Now down here we've got this little black clip that's holding the power board in position. And also, if you notice here, these 5 pins, they go down into the main board itself. So we have to sort of pull it up very straight to get it out. So if I push the clip back with a plastic spudger. So there we go. There is our power board. Caps actually look in pretty good condition. None of them are bulged or domed or anything like that. So I'm pretty pleased with that. But yeah, we need to move that right out of the way because we don't want to get any zaps from the capacitor. You could discharge the capacitors, but it's okay. We're not going to do anything silly. So now it's time to remove our CD drive assembly, and we just got some cables to take off. So first of all, we've got this ribbon cable here. It's usually easier to take it out of the board rather than from the mechanism here. So if we just give it a little tug, there we go, that's out. And then we've got this kind of grounding strap here that we need to take out. So if we just unscrew this screw, and what you can actually do is just pull the strap back out the way, and I'm just going to put the screw back in there so we know where it is. And then we've got to just remove these 2 connectors here. They're quite finicky little connectors because they've got sort of locking pins. So I'm sort of trying to release the locking pins and pull them out at the same time. It's not easy. There we go. So now our CD drive mechanism should just lift out. Which it does. Take off this bit of plastic. Okay, so now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screws to undo. And now we need to pull out this cable which connects the controllers to the main board. So in theory now we should just be able to pull off this top shielding. And here is our Sega Saturn motherboard. So if we look there, that is the model number of this particular board. And that tells me that this is a VA1 PAL board. Now I was kind of wishing that it was a VA0 board because the VA0 and the VA1 have this very cool thing right here. And this is essentially a space for a switch to go where you can actually switch between 50 and 60 Hertz just by putting a switch in there. This switch only works sort of out of the box, I guess, if you've got a VA0 board. If you've got a VA1 board like this one, you have to do a little modification to make this switch work. And that's good in some ways because there's not actually all that many good or recent videos about making a VA1 board have the switch be activated. Now there is a mod that you can do on any Sega Saturn that will just enable you to add a switch. And I think it's lifting pin 79 on this chip here. If you either feed it 5 volts or ground it and switch between the two, that will enable the switching between 50 Hertz and 60 Hertz. So that is a mod that you can do on pretty much any Sega Saturn. Because I've got the model of the board that has space for the switch, but the switch doesn't work out of the box, we need to do something else. And that something else involves this chip right here, and this is the PLL. And essentially we need to either lift pin 1 or cut the trace going to pin 1. On the VA1 version of the board, apparently there's some design flaw where the switch here and down here are sort of linked together and they shouldn't be. And that stops the switch from working. By lifting pin 1 or cutting the trace to pin 1, it will cancel the link that's between the switch and here, so it will work as it did on the VA0 board. But essentially, we do have the facility to switch between 50 and 60 Hertz out of the box. We've just got to do a little work on the PLL chip, and then that will activate this switch at the back here. I don't know how easy it's going to be just to lift that one tiny pin, or whether I should just cut the trace. We'll see. But to get the board out now, all we need to do is simply lift it up. So yeah, here's our loose board. Actually, I'm going to take this off as well. So yeah, let's have a little closer look at the PLL chip and work out what we're going to do with it. Okay, so looking at this is our PLL chip, and it's really handy on these boards because they label the pin numbers really well. So you can see straight out the bat that that is pin 1, which is really handy. So we can see the trace that's going to it. So yeah, we could just snip that. But I think I'm going to take the slightly less easy option. I think I'm going to try and use my soldering iron and a tweezer and just lift that leg up so it's no longer making contact. Now, I don't know at what point sort of manufacturers stopped using leaded solder. Now, the difference between leaded and unleaded solder is unleaded solder has a lot higher melting point. So it means you have to put a lot more heat in the board to make it sort of go liquidy. But leaded solder has got a slightly lower melting point. So it means that you're not sort of pushing as much heat onto the board for as long a period of time, and you know, it could end up causing damage. So I think what I'll do is I'll just put a little blob of solder around pin 1, and that'll mix up with the unleaded solder and hopefully make it easier to lift the leg. Now obviously I'm doing this through a microscope to make things easier for you. Lifting legs and pins and stuff like this on a chip this size, I think you do kind of need a microscope to do it, especially if you're not overly confident. It just gives you a really nice clear view of what's happening. Right, here goes. I'm extremely worried about messing stuff up, but it makes a more interesting video, I guess, if I do. There we go. I think that is lifted. So there you go. You can see the leg has been lifted up and the trace underneath that it went on before. So yeah, we can have a little clearer look at switch 4, SW4, and that is what's going to be our 50 and 60 hertz switch. Now, if you've got the right size switch, you can actually directly mount the switch onto the board. I don't have the right size switch, and I'm going to do something a little bit different, but I'll show you that in a moment. Switch 1 here is a sort of memory reset, so pressing that will clear the memory on the Saturn. So I've just done that, maybe. So the two pins that we need to look at are here and here. And essentially we just need to put a bit of wire to each of those, and then that bit of wire will go to our switch. Now you could just put a blob of solder on top of each of them and put the wire in. But I think what I'm going to try and do is try and do it a little bit neater and go and put the wire through the board. So to do that, I'm going to use my solder sucker and just suck out the factory solder that's there already, and that'll make a nice little hole for us to slip our wire through. That sounded like a euphemism. It wasn't meant to be one. I think maybe I need to put some fresh solder on both of them. I know it always feels counterintuitive to put fresh solder on and then suck that solder off, but I think it's the best way. And actually, I'm going to go crazy and put some flux on there as well. Feel free to call me a mother fluxer in the comments. There we go. So now we just need to put our wires through the holes and solder them into position. So now we've just got our two wires coming out of the board. I think what I might do is I might just put a little bit of hot melt glue on there just to add a bit of mechanical protection. Yeah, I think that's the sensible option. So here is our finished product mostly. So like we saw, pin 1 on the PLL has been lifted. And we've got our two wires glued into position there and soldered through the other side on here. Now I can't remember the specific way round, but essentially with the wires now, having them joined together or switched together makes the console 50 or 60 hertz, and having them pulled apart makes the console either 50 or 60 hertz. I can't remember offhand. Now, something that's really important is we've got to put our plastic piece in and feed the wires through. So what we need to do now is get our board back into the Saturn and wire it to a switch. Now let me tell you a little bit about how we're going to put the switch in the Saturn, because it's a way that I've not seen done before, and I'm actually quite proud of my ingenuity here. So if you remember from before I started tearing my Saturn down, I noted that it didn't have a battery cover. So I actually went onto Thingiverse and found that someone had made a really good replica of the Sega Saturn battery cover, and I 3D printed it, and it worked perfectly. It's really good. I printed it in PETG rather than PLA, so it's a bit stronger, and the sort of top bit flexes and everything like that, and it's pretty decent. And then I thought, if I'm printing a battery cover, can't I put a hole in that for the switch? So I did that. I designed this with some specific switches that I had, and yeah, I've sort of roughly screwed it onto the back battery cover that I printed, and yeah, it works. It looks really good, and I used some tiny little screws. Now you might realise that the switch is sort of offset to the side, and that is the side that the switch is on, but it just didn't feel very aesthetically pleasing, it being on the wonk. Here's the sort of final version that I printed. I've not put the switch in it yet, but essentially I put the switch in the middle, and I've also embedded or sort of extruded 50 Hertz and 60 Hertz, so it's clear from the back what the switch does. And I think it's a little bit cooler than just having a little sticker there. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount the switch into here. I think that's pretty cool. I'm actually really pleased that I was able to use the 3D printer and actually design something that's sort of pretty aesthetically pleasing. And me being me, I put it in the font that I use for all my thumbnails and stuff. So I guess what we could do now is just sort of have the switch attached. We put the two wires on one side, and then when it's in that position, the two wires are making contact, and when it's in that position, the two wires aren't making contact. So I'm just going to put some solder onto the switch. So now I'm just going to solder the wires onto the switch. Cool, and I've just put some heat shrink sleeving on the wires. Cool, so there we go, we've got our finished switch. Okay, well, I guess we need to get it back together and test that it all works. So let's quickly go through that and get this looking a bit more like an actual Sega Saturn. So while I'm trying to roughly put this Sega Saturn back together, let's shout out our awesome channel members. Now, channel members are people who essentially make a small donation each month to help keep the lights on around here. Now, you don't have to become a channel member and pay money to help me out at all. All you have to do is hit like on the video and maybe subscribe to my channel. I'm on the path to 25,000 subscribers, and it would be really awesome to have you along with me. Subscribing to a channel is completely free, and it just means you get told when I upload a video. So anyway, our channel members at time of editing are the Kip fans, who are Matt Lovies, JLC Electrical, For the Burbs, Wayne Cornish, Scott Made a Thing, Michael Wood, Draco MacGyver, Rebecca, Tom Wood and Abigail. And then we've got the incredible Kip Early Birds, who are Tim Salt, Sorcerer Stan, Mark C, Rob Lynn and Will Bennett. And I love these people with all my heart. Yes, it's true. They are the Kip lovers, and they are Bella Webster, Stez6fix, Lawrence, Scott Kendall, Props Retrofix, Chelsea B, DD Media Production, Jay Russell Retro Gaming and Lee Benz. And then I've got a lot of love in my head, because these are the Kip Nutters, and they are Becky Boobar, Alan Green, and the My Mate Vince fan club over on Facebook. Thank you so much to all my channel members. It really does help me keep creating videos, having you guys along with me. Now, I'm having a little bit of trouble with the reset button here, so let me explain. Getting the reset button lined up is a massive pain in the butt. I remember that from the last time I looked at it, but I'm not going to worry too much about fully putting it back together, because I want to test that this works first before buttoning it up. And also we need to know which way the switch goes round so we can mount it in our new battery door. Right, so I've got Daytona USA in there. Just got the disc for now. We'll have a little look at the Saroo shortly if this works. So let's turn it on and see what happens. Yep, we're still at 50 Hertz. So obviously either it hasn't worked or the switch is in the 50 Hertz mode. Yep, okay, so that's Daytona running at 50 Hertz with the black bars at the top and bottom and just running a bit slow. I don't know whether you should turn the console off before you do the switch or not. I'm going to turn it off. Might just switch on the fly, but I don't want to break anything. So if I put my switch, so we're sort of connecting our two wires, I guess that makes it into 60 Hertz. No signal. Oh, there we go. OSSC says 60 Hertz. Yes, that's faster. It does still have the black bars at the top and bottom, but they're a lot smaller. So to make it easier to visualize, I've got the original 50 Hertz version of Daytona on the left, and on the right we've got the 60 Hertz version. Now they quickly lose sync because obviously the right hand side is running faster than the left hand side. But you get the idea, and you can clearly see how much extra screen space you get with the 60 Hertz version. What happens if I flick the switch when it's on? Oh. Oh! Wow, it even works when the console's on. That's mad. And yeah, it's switched down to 50 Hertz. I now know that when the switch is where the two wires are, that is our 60 Hertz mode. So I can put it into the battery cover that way round, and I'll know that that's the right way. Right, okay, well, I won't do that just yet. We can finish that up at the end. So here we've got Sega Rally, my PAL copy of it, running at 50 Hertz on the left and 60 Hertz on the right. And if you pay close attention to the right-hand side, you might spot something a bit weird about it. Now, obviously, these go out of sync pretty quickly because the 60 Hertz version is running a lot quicker, but you get the idea. Now, that was interesting because Sega Rally Championship, the actual sort of sprite kind of data rather than the 3D stuff, it looks slightly out of place. So maybe because that is a PAL game, it had been designed specifically to run at PAL, and sort of the screen positionings had been set for PAL settings. So that's interesting, but it definitely seems to be running a bit faster and smoother and more full screen. So I guess now what we should do is actually get this in and see how this works, because this will mean I can play a whole load more of Sega Saturn games that are backed up copies of my originals. Right, so let's get the Saroo out. We'll get the memory card out as well. And put them onto the SD card, I guess. Okay, so when you put the SD card in, the label is facing the back. Right. I mean, this would be a terrible time to find out the cartridge slot doesn't work. Let's power it up. We had it in 60 Hertz mode, so that's the mode we want it in. Oh. Amazing. Right. Now, I think if you press the left button, you can change through the language. So System CD player would essentially take you through to the CD player that's inbuilt into the Sega Saturn, so you can listen to CDs. Load game disc, I presume it'll boot the game that's in there. We don't need to load a binary or serial debug shell. Let's just select a game first. Wow, look! Games! Oh, there's a good selection of games on here. Die Hard Arcade. Dead or Alive. Oh, Daytona Championship Edition. Oh, man. House of the Dead. Yes. There's a lot of cool games on here. Knights. Knights is amazing. One of my favourites. Now, whilst the sort of 3D games do look a little bit clunky and dated now, the games like Street Fighter Alpha, still awesome 2D games as well. Virtua Cop, no way! Virtua Cop 2, Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter Kids. Right, okay, what game shall we use to demonstrate this? I think I'm going to do Daytona Championship because I haven't played that for years. It's worth noting that the cameras that I film my videos on, they are actually at 25 frames a second. So when the videos are uploaded onto YouTube, they are also 25 frames a second. So the graphics on the games won't look as smooth as they actually look in real life because they've been reduced down to 25 frames a second. So that's why they might not look as smooth as I'm seeing them. Right, that is perfect. I am happy with that. I tell you what, another benefit of using the Saroo over using your CDs is things, in theory, should actually load faster. So let's test that theory out. On the left-hand side of the screen, we've got the CD version of Sega Rally booting up, and on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the Saroo version of Sega Rally booting up. Which will win, I wonder? That is a lot quicker. That is. Yeah, and we're obviously running the American copy of Sega Rally, and the graphic issues of the sprites, the press start button, are gone now. They're just showing correctly on the screen. So obviously it just didn't like the PAL version being run at 60 Hertz. That was the issue there. Right, we're not actually finished. I've fallen down a rabbit hole of awesome gaming because I love the Saturn so much. We need to actually finish this and get the console back together and get the switch put in as well. So I'll turn this off for a minute, stop being distracted, and we can finish up the video. That is a top thing to do to get the reset button in. If you actually remove the reset button, and then when you put the case down, you can use a sort of plastic spudger to reach in and nudge the reset switch over to where it needs to be. And then you can just put the reset switch back in. Perfect. Right, let's get the screws in. Well, now we have it all back together, we need to actually fit our switch properly into our new custom back door. So because we know that it's on 60 Hertz mode when it's at this side of the switch, we need to make sure that the switch goes in like that. I've got some tiny nuts and bolts and washers, and I'm going to put it in. I'm going to make sure I sort of do it slightly offset from the console because I don't want to drop them in the console. I mean, kudos to whoever designed this battery door because it's a really good fitment, and kudos to me for making it into a little switchable mod. Well, there we go. What an amazing mod, and what a fantastic cartridge this Saroo guy is as well. I really like that we haven't had to destroy the insides or remove the CD drive. So to all intents and purposes, it is an original Saturn, but yet you can play different games on it, and it's got a really awesome selection of games included, especially when you think we paid sort of around about 30 to 40 pounds for this. And obviously we can find more copies of our original games online and put them onto the SD card and just play those as well. And the mod is just so smart. I love the fact that pretty much everything we needed to use to make the mod is inside the console already. We just needed to add a switch into the mix and lift that pin. I'm really happy. That has made my day. It's so good. And yeah, I'm actually sort of thoroughly impressed with my 3D printing and modeling skills to fit the mod in such a sort of sweet little way. I mean, you could have that switch on the actual solder pads if you had the right size switch and just sort of keep it in the inside. But I like the fact that we've got it mounted on the back and we haven't had to drill anything or destroy any part of the console to put it in there. We've just printed a brand new part for it. And that's something I want to try and do more of in future videos. I'm slowly learning about 3D printers and sort of printing parts and stuff like that. So yeah, that is a really nice little project to get started with. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video as well. I hope you found it informative and educational and hopefully a little bit fun along the way. So yeah, I've got a buttload of Sega Saturn games to play now. So I will bid you farewell. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But for now, it's game over.